All right, welcome to this explainer. We constantly interact with hidden economic forces that shape literally everything in our everyday world. Today, we're going to uncover those invisible strings, the ones that pull at our wallets, dictate how businesses strategize, and even shape massive global government policies. We're talking about a specific economic concept that acts as the ultimate great equalizer between buyers and sellers.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine just for a second a massive technological breakthrough in agriculture, something that allows wheat farmers to produce 20% more crops per acre. Now, on paper, that sounds absolutely fantastic, right? More wheat, more money. But what if I told you that this incredible news could actually leave those exact same farmers poorer? I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive, but to solve this real-world mystery, we first need to understand one foundational concept.
And that concept, my friends, is elasticity. Essentially, it's a measure of exactly how responsive buyers and sellers are to changes in market conditions, specifically changes in price. Think of it like a giant rubber band. When the price of something goes up, how much does our buying behavior stretch? Do we just snap and immediately stop buying it, or do we stubbornly keep buying it no matter what the price tag says? That stretchiness, that flexibility, is exactly what economists call elasticity. So, to solve our farming mystery, here is a quick roadmap. We're going to build our conceptual toolkit step by step today. 1. The power of elasticity. 2. Understanding demand elasticity. 3. Supply elasticity. And finally, 4. Paradoxes resolved. Okay, part 1. The power of elasticity. Let's just lay down the foundation for why this concept has so much unbelievable power over the market. Moving right along to part 2, understanding demand elasticity. Let's look at things from the buyer's perspective. Price elasticity of demand simply measures how willing we, as consumers, are to buy less of something as its price goes up. But the thing is, there's no single universal rule here. Our behavior completely changes depending on the specific item we're looking at. So let's look at some real-world numbers that economists have actually calculated. 0.1. That is a really tiny number, and it represents the price elasticity of demand for eggs. See, because eggs are a relatively cheap staple and a pretty rigid necessity for a ton of recipes, our buying habits barely stretch at all when the price changes. If the price of eggs jumps by 10%, people only drop their egg buying by about 1%. It barely moves the needle. That right there is what we call highly inelastic demand. Now let's bump that up to 1.6. This is the elasticity for beef. It's way more elastic than eggs. Why? Well, it's all because of substitutes. Think about it. If the price of beef suddenly skyrockets, you don't just sit there and accept it. You can literally just walk a few feet down the grocery aisle and grab some chicken or pork instead. When there are close substitutes readily available, our demand stretches a lot more easily. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Mountain Dew, which sits at a highly elastic 4.4. I mean, that is incredibly elastic. Mountain Dew is a very specific brand, and arguably a luxury, or at the very least, a non-necessity. If the price of Mountain Dew spikes, consumers drop it in a heartbeat. They switch to a dozen other sodas or, just drink water. The more of a luxury something is, and the more narrowly defined that market is, the more highly elastic the demand becomes. So what does this all mean if you're, say, a business owner? It all boils down to this absolutely crucial equation, total revenue, which is just the price of the good multiplied by the quantity you sell. If you're selling a good with inelastic demand, like our eggs from earlier, and you raise your price, the quantity you sell only drops a tiny bit. That means your total revenue actually goes up. But, and this is a big but, if you sell an elastic good like Mountain Dew and you hike the price up, your sales volume is going to fall so sharply that it completely wipes out the benefit of the higher price. Your total revenue drops. You absolutely have to know your elasticity before you even touch that price tag. Now, there are actually two other quick ways our demand stretches. First is income elasticity, which measures how our buying changes when our paychecks change. For normal goods, we buy more when we earn more. Simple enough. But for inferior goods, like taking the bus, we actually buy less of them when we get richer, because we opt for a car instead. Then we have cross-price elasticity, which measures how the price of one item messes with the demand for another. If hot fudge gets cheaper, sure, we buy more of it, but we also buy more ice cream because they go together, they're complements. But if frozen yogurt gets cheaper, we might buy less ice cream because they're substitutes. All right, let's pivot to part 3, understanding supply elasticity. We are flipping the coin here to look at the seller's side. Basically, how quickly can producers respond to price changes? That's your price elasticity of supply. Mark Twain had this famous piece of advice. Buy land, they're not making it anymore. And honestly, that brilliantly illustrates the absolute extreme end of the supply spectrum, which is perfectly inelastic supply. It literally does not matter if the price of a beachfront property multiplies by 1,000. Producers cannot magically manufacture more coastline. The quantity supplied absolutely cannot stretch, no matter how high the price goes. But for most everyday manufactured goods, supply elasticity really just comes down to time. In the short run, a factory can maybe, add a night shift if prices go up, but they're still physically boxed in by their current building size. Supply is inflexible. But in the long run, supply is highly adaptable. If prices stay high for a while, companies have the time to build entirely new factories, or brand new companies jump into the market. So long-run supply is almost always more elastic than short-run supply.
Let's move to part 4 and see how this builds our conceptual toolkit to solve some massive, complex market mysteries, starting with that farming puzzle we dropped right at the beginning.
So let's break down the solution to the farming paradox step by step. Step 1. University researchers invent a brand new hybrid wheat that boosts crop yields by 20%. Every single farmer adopts it so they can sell more. The total supply of wheat shifts massively. Okay, now step 2, we have to look at the buyers. Demand for basic food is highly inelastic. Think about it. People only need to eat so much bread in a given day. Just because wheat is cheaper doesn't mean you're suddenly going to eat 20% more sandwiches. Because demand won't stretch, step 3 kicks in. To clear out this huge new surplus of wheat, the market price absolutely plummets. And that brings us to step 4. Because the price drop is so severe and the increase in sales volume is so tiny, the farmer's total revenue actually falls. That massive technological breakthrough literally left them poorer.
And the thing is, because competitive farmers have to adopt the new technology just to keep up with everyone else, they collectively trap themselves in these lower revenues. Now, this economic reality explains a really curious public policy from the Department of Agriculture. The government actually provides taxpayer-funded subsidies to farmers to intentionally not plant crops. By artificially reducing the supply of farm products, the government helps push the market price up. And since demand is inelastic, this coordinated artificial reduction in supply actually increases the farmer's total revenue.
To put that into perspective, the long-term impact of this elasticity trap is absolutely staggering. Just look at these numbers. Back in 1900, 40% of the U.S. labor force worked on farms. 40%. By 2020, it was down to just 2%. Yet, thanks to those exact technological advances, overall food output more than quadrupled. Because food demand is inelastic, that massive surge in supply continually drove prices and revenues down, basically signaling millions of people to leave farming for other industries. Elasticity quite literally reshaped the entire American workforce. Okay, let's look at our second paradox, OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Back in the 1970s, OPEC decided to slash the supply of oil to jack up prices. And in the short run, it worked brilliantly. Prices spiked and their revenues went through the roof because in the short run, both oil supply and demand are highly inelastic. You can't just miraculously stop driving to work tomorrow, right? But in the long run, the whole strategy faltered. Over a few years, non-OPEC countries scrambled and found new oil reserves, and consumers started buying highly fuel-efficient cars. Both long-run supply and demand proved to be elastic. So the price of oil eventually collapsed, teaching OPEC a harsh lesson. Market manipulation is way, way harder over the long term. And this brings us to our final, and honestly, probably the most heavy-hitting paradox today. When the government increases drug interdiction, meaning they crack down hard at the border to stop illegal drugs from getting into the country, does that actually increase or decrease drug-related crime? So the crucial point is right here in the economic math. Drug addiction makes the demand for illegal drugs incredibly inelastic. Addicts are going to do almost anything to maintain their habit, regardless of cost. So, when the government cracks down at the border, they do successfully reduce the supply. But what happens when you severely reduce supply against highly inelastic demand? The street price of the drug skyrockets. And because the price rises proportionately way more than the actual drug use falls, the total revenue in the illegal drug market actually increases. Addicts might need to commit more crimes, like theft, just to afford those higher prices, and gangs suddenly have way more money to fight over. This is exactly why economists point out that policies restricting supply can, completely unintentionally, fuel the exact criminal enterprises they're trying to starve. So from the wheat in your daily bread to the gas in your car, all the way up to massive government policies, elasticity is that invisible rubber band dictating the outcomes. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to apply to your own life. Think about this. If gas prices doubled today, how much would your personal habits stretch tomorrow? You'd probably grumble, maybe complain a bit, but you'd pay it. But what about 5 years from now? Would you have moved closer to work, maybe bought an electric car? Your personal elasticity changes the world over time. Think about that the very next time you look at a price tag. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the forces around you.